Hello everyone, welcome to this webinar on GMAT Test Taking Strategy Masterclass. I'm Piyush and I'm going to be your main host today. I'm going to help you understand how the GMAT works, how the GMAT test works, what are the strategies that you should follow, and all of it. So it's going to be a really interactive webinar today. You're going to learn a lot of new things. Trust me, like when I was a student, I didn't know a lot of it, and I know how much I struggled because of that. So you're going to learn a lot of new things around it. But first, before we start, I would like to definitely know a little more about you. So please feel free to go ahead and introduce yourself, where you are from, what's your target score like, and when are you planning to take the GMAT. So please feel free to share some information about you, and also let me know like what are the common issues that you face, or if you're able to hear me clearly, please select the yes, as like mention a yes in the comments. So I'm looking forward to some of your comments here. Okay, so I'll wait for some comments here and then I will get to this. So please let me know if all of you can hear me loud and clear, and like just feel free to go ahead and introduce yourself. Tell me a little more about yourself. And this is gonna be a really interesting webinar. You're gonna learn a lot about the GMAT testing strategy, the algorithm, and a lot of it. Okay, and it's gonna be purely focused on that part completely around the most common questions, the most common mistakes people make. And I'm gonna take a lot of case studies today. So I'm gonna take a lot of case studies of different students to help you understand cumulatively from all the experiences that we have till date in the last 10 years or so of working on related to GMAT applicants, that exactly what are the important strategies that one needs to take care of when they're focusing on the GMAT as a test. Okay, so thank you, Shubham, Anurag, Ankul, for letting me know that my voice is clear. Bhavna says I'm from Nepal, and she is able to hear me. That's great, Bhavna. So happy to hear from you. Okay, guys. So none of you have told about your target scores and all, but I understand. Like this time of the year, there are some people who are looking at a short stint at the GMAT. Let's say quickly get done with it in another 10-15 days to apply in round two. But most of the people are looking at 2022 at mid-cycle. So most of you would probably be having more time in your hands to prepare. And doesn't matter really, even if you are like, let's say, doing your going to start your prep later on, or you are already preparing, this webinar is going to help all of you, because this webinar is all about the GMAT algorithm actually help you prepare properly as well. Even if you have not started your prep, it will help you prepare properly. So without any further ado, I have created a lot of gravity around it. So let's get started. So as I said, I'm Piyush. I'm going to be a main host. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a strategy expert. I have basically I have worked with many students in the past and helped a lot of people improve from all kind of scores to all kind of scores. And personally, have done my MBA as well. I have taken the GMAT, scored a 740 with a Q50 and verbal 41. And I love analyzing data. I love collecting data. I love analyzing them and coming up with the right strategies based on that data that I have done. So I work at GMAT Viz as of now, and I work as a GMAT strategy consultant. I help people improve their GMAT scores, and off lately we have helped one student improve from a 520 to a 760. That's one of the top stories that we have. So I love helping students get to their target score. That's basically about me. And what I'm going to do in this webinar today is I'm going to talk about some of the common concerns that people have around the algorithm. And please feel free to let me know if you guys have any questions around the algorithm. You can tell me right now. I may not answer them right away, but if that is something which I have not covered in the webinar, I'll take a note of it and I'll make sure that I take it up as a part of the discussion. Maybe towards the beginning, or towards the end, wherever I feel that we can take it up, I will definitely love to keep those pointers. So just ensure that you tell me anything that you have in your mind around the common concerns that you have about the prep and all of that. Okay, so feel free to let me know if you have any specific thing around that, and I will be more than happy to take all of them up. Okay, so let's see some comments from you. I'll just wait for a few minutes. Let's see what are the common concerns that you have. I have a lot of it written here, but just want to make sure that like we are covering everything that is there in your mind. Again, that's a broad statement, I know, but I definitely like to cover as much of it as is possible. So please feel free to let me know. Okay, effect of AWA in selection. Okay, that's a most selection related question, Satish. Okay, definitely take it up. I'll definitely keep that in mind. Let's see a few more questions, and I'm taking note of all of the questions that you guys are saying. So please feel free to let me know. I'll be keeping a note of them, and I'm taking note of the ones which I have not like written over here. So let me talk about the common concerns in the meantime. You guys mention your thought processes as well. So one common issue which I actually find with students when I speak to like I generally speak to 4 to 5 students on a daily basis, if not more. One common concern that I hear from them is I always feel time crunch towards the end of the test. I don't know how to pace myself. I'm always short on time when I reach towards the end of the test, and I don't know how to pace it. That's one thing which I hear from students. Second thing that I hear is I don't understand how the algorithm works. A lot of people don't really understand it. They take it like just another test. For them, it's just about getting a high accuracy, getting more questions correct. That's all they know. But very few people actually understand how the GMAT algorithm works in reality. They don't understand it as well. Many people say, I come to me and say that I'm scoring poorly because I'm not able to solve the last few questions properly in the test because of the time issues. I'm always skipping last 3 or 4 questions. Even yesterday, I had a word with a guy who has scored a 48 in Quant, and he mentioned that for the last 3 questions, I did not have time. I did not have time at all. I had to guess them mostly. What do I do? Okay, and that's something which I hear from many people. How do I improve the average time per question? Many people say, again, you might find most of it around the time because that's what the most common queries I get. Uh, how do I improve my average time per question? I take a lot of time to solve the questions. How do I improve on that? And another very important question is when I take the mock test, I see a score of 740, 750, 720. Again, different people have different scores. But when I take the actual test, my score drops by 50 points or more. What's happening? Am I feeling anxious? Sometimes yes, I am feeling anxious on the test day. I make silly mistakes under that pressure. How do I work on this? So I'm going to take up all these important points which I've showed on your screen, and I'm going to take up all of them and take answer all of those for you. And let me see some questions. Satyabhata says, I gave my GMAT online yesterday. I had 12, 14 questions from geometry and coordinate geometry. Trust me, most of them were 700 level. Is the same pattern being followed? I wonder how will I score. So Satyabhata, again, I have not seen that many questions from geometry coming up. 700 level questions are bound to appear if you're doing well on the test. That's generally a good sign. But there are experimental questions that you need to be aware of, and those can come at any point of time. So 12 to 14 questions from geometry is generally unheard of. Mostly people get about 5 to 7 questions from geometry. That's what has been the general case, but it differs from person to person definitely. Satish, I'll be covering about the sequence to choose. Don't worry, that is something which we'll be covering. Ankul says time which one should spend on hard questions and time one should spend on RC. Okay, good point, Ankul. I have that covered. Like timing that strategy has been covered in depth. I'll be talking about timing for easy, medium, hard questions, timing for SC, CR, RC, quant, all of it. Okay, I'm gonna help you understand how should you pace yourself also. So a lot of people see on online forums or blogs that you should pace yourself equally or this way or that way. I'm going to answer all those questions also. How should you pace yourself? Okay, Gagan says, I've taken the GMAT today and messed up cause of timing. The exam was difficult than the GMAT prep marks. Yeah, so the actual test tends to be a little more difficult than the GMAT prep marks. And then there's that anxiety issue also. So I'll talk about how to take care of it. Ishwa says, what to do when time running in lead and number of questions answered are in lag. Okay, so Ishwa, that's probably the first thing which I'm going to talk about today. So let's see the agenda again. Just a second, guys. I'm not sure why this particular. Just give me 1 second. Okay, I'm not sure why that word is not coming completely on the screen, but let me try once again. It's not coming, but let's see. So the agenda for the today's webinar is that we will be working on case studies on test taking strategy. We'll be taking up some case studies. As I said, that's the main thing. We will take up different case studies, different scenarios, and we'll take up important scenarios that people face during the test. And how does it impact the test taking strategy that you should follow, more importantly. So we'll be taking this case studies to get important lessons out of it and apply that on our test. Okay, that's the first thing that we'll do. Then we will talk about the timing strategy for verbal. So honestly, the first part, like case study part, is where we are going to spend bulk of our time, about 50 minutes or so. And then we will focus on the timing strategy for verbal, followed by timing strategy for quant. And then we will talk about deciding the right section order. So how should you start? Whether you should start with quant first or verbal first, whether you should take the online GMAT or should you take the test center GMAT, whatever. All of that is going to be covered, and in the end we will open it for an additional tips and open-ended Q&A. If you have any questions around your prep and all, we will take it up towards the end. So that's how I'm going to pace the webinar. It's going to last for about 90 minutes from now. Okay, so without any further ado, let's get started. Let's understand how the algorithm works through different case studies. Okay, so the first case study is actually about me, and it's going to be very interesting case study because it kind of brings like it kind of gives us an answer to a very interesting question, and I would like to hear from you guys also about it, and give you 1 minute break to think about it. But what do you think? How smart students take the GMAT test? How do smart students pace themselves? Do they keep enough time for all questions, or they fall short of time in the last 4 or 5 questions? What do you think, guys? Please let me know in the chat here. What do you guys think? And I'm going to be muted for a minute. Okay, so I'm going to be muted for a minute, but let me know if what you guys think about it. Okay, so I'm going to be muted and you might not see me for a minute. Okay, Ishwar says I'll go for the first one. Have enough time for all questions. Ankur says falling short of time is better. Okay, that's interesting. What about others? Okay, let's see more comments. Okay, smart guys do answer all the questions within the simulated time. Satish says okay. So first one, Gagan says none. Okay, so Gagan probably goes for something else. I'd like to hear from you, Gagan. What will you choose? Okay, Ankul says, I'm choosing the second strategy because last 5 are really hard if the initial ones are correct. Good point, Ankul. Arden is saying she's finding the PPT a little blurry. I was checking the live feed also. It kind of seems fine to me. It's not as great at it as it is at my end, but still it should be readable. So please check out your internet connection. Not sure. If other people are also facing the problem, let me know. I'm actually on a 200 Mbps connection, so should not be an issue from my side, ideally. Okay, Satyapata says, in some questions, we need to start smart and smartly guess the answers by eliminating options. Good point, Satyapata. So, really valid inputs from all of you. So I see a good number of you going for the second option over the first one, and I personally am I'm in favor of the second one, not the first one. Obviously, if you can manage the first one, that's great. But people who can manage the first one are probably people of the capability around 760 plus level. But if you are looking at anything below that, like which is the range which most of the people aim for, second option will generally work better for you. And if you can manage the first one, like if you are able to do that, that's great. But if you are falling short of your target, or like targeting anything less than 760, around that score range you are in, then the second one is a better option. And let's see why I say so. I'm not going to just make blanket statements. I'm going to give you data. I'm going to tell you why I think so as well. I'm going to help you with that. So let's take this case in point. And this is exactly what happened with my personal GMAT attempt. And a very important lesson is going to come from this. So I remember when I was approaching towards the end of the verbal section, and this is the first section that I started with my the test, basically. So I started with verbal first. And when I was approaching the end of the verbal section, I still remember I had 14 questions left, and there was 19 minutes on the clock. And to be very honest, I knew that I'm short on time. I'm running behind time. And if you do some basic math and do some calculation, you can see that I don't really have even 1.5 minutes to solve these questions on an average. I had much less time actually. So if 14 questions, 19 minutes left, I was really running behind time. So that pressure was building up. Now what happens? I get a RC passage, and then this RC is something which actually derails a lot of your prep. Like many times I see people telling me that, okay, there's this RC which came. I was really working under time pressure, and I also had a similar situation. And to my agony, somehow I spent about 20-30 seconds on this RC. I was working under pressure, so obviously I had to uh, do it a little faster, kind of. I have to save time and all. So I spent about 30 seconds. I read about 5-6 lines or 4 lines, whatever. And what I saw was I felt that passage was really weird. It was convoluted. My background is from engineering, and like I had no background in humanities. That was a typical history focused humanities type of passage. I did not like uh, the construction of the sentences. I did not like the idea. I was not able to relate to it in simple terms. It was really weird. It was really convoluted. I was feeling, what should I do now? That was the question that was there in front of me. Now I know many of us face this problems. Like if you have taken the GMAT, or if you have taken the mocks, you would have faced similar issues, if not the same issue. And you might as well come across this question: what do you do? What do you do in this case? So there are three options that I had with me, and I'm going to ask a lot of questions to you guys because I want it to be interactive, and I want you to do as the same as well. Like feel free to ask me anything at any point of time. I'll be more than happy to take it up. So tell me, if you were put under the same situation, you had 14 questions left and only 19 minutes on the clock remaining, okay? And you see a RC passage which is weird or convoluted. What will you do? I had three options in front of me. Think about it and let me know. First option was to skip some of the questions or do them half-heartedly. I could actually skim through the passage. I could uh, just do a quick reading. That's not my usual self, by the way. I generally spend a lot more time on the passage. So I could skim through the passage and quickly go through the questions, answer some of the questions which are direct ones, or like just do the all the questions half-heartedly. That was one option I had. Second option I had was do this RC really, really well. Okay, and then be selective in the last 10 questions. So give whatever time is required for the RC, kind of try to get it right, and then try to be selective in the last 10. But whatever time is left, then just do some questions in the last 10. Maybe if less time is available, 1 minute per question, I just do like half of them. That was one option I had. The third option was obviously skip the passage entirely and focus on getting the last 10 questions correct. Okay, so what do you do in this case? Again, I have some responses already. It seems like most of you are going for C. Supriya, Gaurav, Ashutosh, Satish also goes for C. Zar Bunwal says B is the right option. A couple of you going for A. Nico and Nagarjan says, okay, do some of the questions properly. Don't go either way. Like B and C are extremes. Like go for A, which is like somewhere in between, more balanced. Sanket says, I'll go for C. Okay, so let's see more responses. And guys, this is a very, very important question. See, one important thing which many people don't do, and take this as a very important lesson if you have to. And I have a slide dedicated to this. I'm gonna talk about it for sure, like in depth over here. That always ensure that you are focusing on taking strategic pauses. Such important pause points, such important points, whenever they come in your test, you should not decide in a hurry. You should give yourself the right amount of time to make the right decision, because the right decision can make or break the entire game. Trust me. And most people, what they do is they just go with the flow. They don't take enough time to decide, and that's when they lose that particular how do I say it, lose that particular edge that they have at that point of time, and they might as well miss that chance of scoring well. Okay, so it's very important to understand and identify the right strategies in the middle of the test as well, which even if it means you taking a break at that point of time. So what I did was, I'm going to tell you my thought process. A very few of you have gone for B. Ankul also goes for Ankul. I think you mentioned B earlier also. Shubham goes for B as well. So very few of you have gone for B or A, but most of you have said C is the right option. Again, C might work in some cases. I'll talk about that as well. But how I looked at it was that, okay, if I go for A, which is like skipping some of the questions, or I just skip the entire RC passage, what's gonna happen? Let's see. So how I analyzed this was, see, I have a hard passage in front of me. This is a weird passage. This is a convoluted passage. Most likely it's a tough one. Okay, if I'm feeling it's weird, and I'm someone who was prepared, it was not like I was just taking the test as a gamble. I was prepared. I was seeing a good score on the mock test. In the last mock test before my actual GMAT, I got a 760 on it. So I kind of knew that, okay, if this is a test, like if this is a RC which is difficult, then like it seems hard to me. It's most likely difficult. Okay, so yes, you are right. It depends on your strength on each section. And that's why I said in some cases, C might make sense. Okay, but I'll definitely come to that. Don't worry about it. But let's still see how I looked at the situation. So I told myself this is most likely a difficult question. Okay, if this is most likely a difficult question, and if it is a difficult question, what does it tell me? What is the inference that I can draw? Can anyone of you tell me if this is a difficult question? Let's assume that this is a difficult question for a moment. Then what is the inference that you can draw from that particular thing, this particular data point? Anything what you guys think? Okay, let me wait for a few responses. What do you guys think can be drawn as an inference if this is a difficult question? You're doing well till that RC? Good. Yes, Kagan, that's the right inference. So I have been doing well. What it basically means is I have been doing really, really well on the test till now. So I have put in a lot of hard work till this 20-second question to get to a level where now the algorithm is giving me tough questions. And that, think of it like this: the GMAT is an adaptive test. In order to score well, there are two things that you need to do. One, you need to up the ante. So you need to increase the difficulty level of the questions, because once the difficulty level of questions increases, these are high value questions. Okay. So one thing is you need to increase the difficulty level of the questions. And the second thing is you need to get them right, because if you just get the hard questions and you don't get them right, you're just doing half the bit. You're actually making a fool out of yourself if you don't get these questions right, because these are high value questions. So how I thought about it was that if I do something which was not the usual self of me, like which I don't do generally, I do skimming or do questions half-heartedly, there's a very high chance that I'm going to lose this high value questions. I'm going to make mistakes in this high value questions. Now, what happens then? I do save time. I do save time, but the way the algorithm works is I will be saving time for the last 10 questions. And sadly, these questions are gonna be of much lower value. Okay. So I'm saving time. I'm kind of trying to save time by spending less time on this RC, but I save time for questions which are of low value. In my opinion, that was not the right strategy, because I'm much better off by giving more time to the high value questions. Okay, so I think Yash has another question. Yash says, does it mean that you have done well in all sections or only RC? Does difficulty level of question depends on each subsection or as a whole? So Yash is basically a mix of both. It's individual sections also and it's overall also. So in my case, I also saw a CR boldface questions right before this RC. So I kind of knew that I'm doing overall better. And I kind of understood that I understood the GMAT algorithm also. I had a pretty good understanding of the algorithm also. So third quarter is generally where it peaks if you're doing well. So really important question, Yash. Good that you brought it up. So to me, this strategy would have led me to a score of 36 to 39. Like again, this is not my score because I did not choose this strategy, but this is the prediction that I can make based on the thousands of ESRs that I have looked through in my entire career. Okay. And even before this webinar, I actually went through about 200 different ESRs, okay, just to get you the right case studies to discuss today. Okay, so this is what I would have gotten if I followed strategy A. What about strategy B? Again, strategy B was, in my opinion, the best one. And why? Simply put, I am someone who does decently well on RCs. Like my average percentile, not just accuracy, is about 80, 85 in RC. So it's generally like I get that number easily. And I knew that if I read the passage well, I can get it right. That's the confidence that I had, because that's the approach that I had been following during my entire prep. So I thought that, okay, if I stay with that approach, I kind of get this high value questions correct, okay, which kind of helps me win a part of the battle. So what I did was, and you won't like most of the people are not able to believe me when I say this, I actually spent about 5 minutes time, okay, 5 minutes time on just reading the passage. Okay, I read the passage really, really well. I made sure I pause. And when I say I spent 5 minutes on reading the passage, I don't mean I read the passage multiple times. Many a people do it in multiple reads. That's not effective, guys. I did the first read really well. I was contextualizing, I was understanding. It was a tough passage, I understand. But trust me, there is nothing tough. No genre can make it difficult for you if you're reading it properly, if you're contextualizing it the right way. I gave 5 minutes to do that. The good part is I only required 3 minutes after it to actually solve the questions. I was able to solve the questions much faster. They were hard questions, but I was able to solve it much faster because of my better understanding or a sound understanding of the passage that I had. Oh, so by the end of that passage, and again, there was about a 1 minute time which I spent initially, which was wasted. Why it was wasted? Because if you remember, I started reading the passage in the first iteration. I spent about 30 seconds on it, 20, 30 seconds, whatever. And I read about 4 or 5 lines where I did not understand anything. And then I took a pause of about 20, 30 seconds to strategize and think, okay, what do I want to do? So I wasted that 1 minute almost over there. And this 5 and 3 minutes was spent. So if I remember correctly, after this passage, I had 10 questions remaining and I only had 10 minutes left. And how I thought about this was that I will just selectively do 5 or 6 questions from the last 10. If there is another RC that comes, I'll probably skip that one. Okay, because I would like to like just hold my horses for just one RC in that last quarter, and I will focus more on SC and CR. So I just thought that way, that okay, last 10 questions I'll do 5 6 of them, but I'll do them properly. I'll not cut corners there. I will not try to do all of them. I'll just do some of the questions properly. That's how I thought. And the thought process was, if I get this passage right, this 10 questions are gonna be of a higher value. The value offered by GMAT for each of these questions is gonna be much higher. So whatever time I spend, whatever accuracy I get will be on this high value questions, this high value questions, and then this higher value questions, which are going to be of more value. So overall, this strategy seemed great to me. Okay. So Nagarajan says, wow, 10 questions in 10 minutes is insane. I did not do 10 questions in 10 minutes, Nagarajan. I just did 6 of them is what I remember. So that's what I did. 4, I just randomly marked. I did not miss any questions. Don't miss any questions. Make sure you mark everything, attempt everything. Okay. So in the end, I had a verbal score of 41. I had a verbal score of 41. Okay. And my total score was 740. So if you see, what is the important lesson that you guys can get out of this? What is the lesson that you got out of this? Please feel free to share that in the comments. I'll be more happy to see them, your comments also. Because as I said, I want it to be interactive as possible, and I want to make sure that you guys are getting the right lessons from the session. Okay. And we're going to discuss a lot of case studies, not just this one. So what is the lesson that you guys got out of this? And I'm going to share another story of mine. Some of you might think that I'm a storyteller, but this is from one personal experience that I had long back in my life. And I personally feel that is something which will add a lot of value to all of you. To all my students who have scored 700 plus on the GMAT, have improved by 100 points or so, this story has worked wonders for them. Okay, so I'm going to share about that. So the difference between, I could have ended up with a 700 if I actually went up ahead with strategy A or strategy C. Okay, but the difference between that 700 and 740 is that 20-second strategic pause. Good point, Sukhdeep, sorry, you said don't panic. That's very important. Don't give away to that pressure. Don't just go with the flow. Use your head. If you follow cricket or basketball or whichever sport, in IPL there is a 2.5 minute strategic timeout. I understand that's for advertisements and marketing purpose, but if you look at the entire impact that it has on the game, you need to think from, you need to sometimes get away from the zone, okay, that the pressure that you are in, and think outside the box, or think, distance yourself and look at the bigger picture. That's something which is very, very important. And one incident that comes to my mind was when I was in class 12. I was taking the physics test in my school, and like this was a pre-board kind of an exam which was there. And I still remember myself reading through the paper. I used to be the topper in my school. Like I always got the first rank. And I still remember reading that paper. And I kind of, by the time I completed reading the paper, question paper, I had this habit of reading everything before I start answering. So I kind of felt that I cannot even get marks which are required to pass the test. I was so pressurized at that point of time that Piyush, you're gonna like be in a very, very bad position. You're not gonna pass this test. And I was really worried. I was really tensed. And my school followed a different pattern. So like in the board examinations, we used to get 3 hours to take the entire test. Our school actually used to give us 2.5 hours to like do the same thing. So I was already under more time pressure because we had less time available. And you know what I did at that point of time? It's like, it drives most people crazy when I say this to them. I just kept my head down, relaxed for 5 minutes, started singing songs in my mind. I didn't want to disturb other people. I started singing songs in my mind and relaxed and calmed myself down. The only thing I told at that point of time to myself was, Piyush, you're gonna fail, right? You're gonna fail anyway. Okay. So why do you take the pressure to fail? Be relaxed. If you want to fail, you are anyway gonna fail. Just be happy. At least be happy. Why do you want to build pressure on your head? So I told myself this. 5 minutes I laid down. Even students, my fellow students, my teachers come to me. The invigilator came to me and said, "Are you feeling okay? You're just laying down your head and like, are you feeling all right?" I said, "Yes, I'm just taking a pause." And the teacher was saying, "Yeah, why do you want to take a pause? Like your the test is running short on time. Everyone is asking for more sheets. They are working hard. Why are you taking that break?" I said, "I want to relax." And after 5 minutes, I started looking at each question properly. All I did was I just attempted the ones that I knew properly. I started doing them one by one, did my best calmly, coolly, and I attempted the entire paper in whichever possible way I could. After 2.5 weeks, one of my friends who was studying with the physics tutor who was teaching in our school, he came to me in another coaching which I used to take with him and told me that, Piyush, you have achieved the highest marks in physics. I said, impossible. You're like crazy. It's not possible. I was about to fail in the test. Like, how can I get the highest marks? And to my surprise, after 2 days, like the results were out, and I actually achieved the highest marks. I got a 67 out of 80. 80 was the full marks. I got 67 out of 80 in the test. And this same guy was actually thinking about failing the test, struggling to do that, to just pass the test. And when I got that highest marks, I kind of went back and started looking at what really happened. I kind of analyzed what really happened. And the way I looked at it, I was someone who was prepared. I have gone through all the syllabus for physics, which was there. And then similar thing applies for GMAT. The story is important because the same thing applies for GMAT. Now, when I actually looked at the test, my objective was to score the maximum marks possible because I'm the topper and there are other competitors who are there. I need to get a better score than them. The moment I saw one or two questions which were not from my comfort zone or I was not 100% confident about, I started panicking. And I started feeling that I cannot answer this, I cannot answer that, and all of that clouded my judgment. But the moment I took that 5 minute break and I calmed myself down, I was able to reach to even the farthest corners of my memory and go through even those topics which I was not really sure of and write something around it logically, because at the end of the day, it was a logical test. GMAT also is a logical test. I was able to do it logically and I was able to get a very high score. And that's one lesson that entirely changed my thought process for any competitive exam that I took after that. And that is something which helped me on GMAT. So this strategic pausing, mark my words, guys, I've given a lot of lecture on this and storytelling on this, but this is very, very important. I see many people struggling just because they are feeling anxious on the day of the test. So don't panic. Good point, Sukhdeep. Don't panic. If you're feeling anxious, put your pen down. Put your pen down, lean back, relax for 20 minutes, 20 seconds, 1 minute also if required. Some of you might think you're already running short on time. So what is the benefit of this? You will run shorter. Again, you will have less time available. But think of it like this, that if you're running short of time and you're just working under panic situation, you're going to make a lot of mistakes. You're going to read a lot, reread a lot, and all of that is not going to help you. So make sure you distance yourself and strategically decide what is the right thing to do. And I'm going to share more stories like this for people who have done this on the GMAT and have actually gotten much greater results. Okay, so we'll definitely talk about this. So Shreya has a question. She says, with this learning now, at what ratio time to question should we pause and strategize? So Shreya, again, I'm not pausing at every question. I paused at relevant points. This was more of a strategic pause, not for every question. For every question, what you're looking at is the right method. That is something I'll talk about. Okay. So, sir, there's a blackout in Uncle says in difficult questions and confidence drops. So, Uncle, for that, you need to work on your strategy part, like as in strategy, as in your question solving strategy. I'll talk about that as well. Nagarajan says, when you feel you have less time at hand and more questions to do, take a step back and strategize. Good point. If it is an RC, invest to get it right to increase value of upcoming questions, then selectively answer. Great, Nagarajan, you have summarized it really, really well. So this was the first case in point that I had for you, and then a very important lesson for you guys. Make sure you are not taking the wrong decisions because of time pressure. Okay, Ahuna has a question with reference to the RC decision. Do you recommend to attempt the difficult questions at the beginning of the quarter, then a difficult question towards the end of it if you are short on time? So Ahuna, most likely you will not, like, you don't decide the difficulty level. The difficulty level is decided by the algorithm. I'm sure you already know it, but difficult questions have to be attempted And the first three quarters matter more than the fourth quarter. So you need to give more attention to questions that come early on, because if you don't do them well, then it impacts the score later on. And that's something which I'm going to talk about now. So very good point, Ahuna. I'm going to talk about now. So for those of you who want to understand the algorithm better, again, this is a standard slide that I cover in most of my webinars to help you understand this part. How the algorithm really works is most of you will be starting with medium difficulty level questions. Okay, and if you get that particular question right, and this is the most simplified example, GMAT does not work in exactly the same way. I'll tell you how it works later. But think of it as a simplified example to get the point across. Okay, so you start with a medium difficulty question. If you do well on this question, if you do it really, really well and get it right, you get a harder question next. Okay, so you get a medium hard question most likely. And if you do that well as well, then the difficulty level goes to hard. You get that right, it stays at hard. But if you get the next question wrong, it will bring it down again to medium hard. That's how it is supposed to work. Okay. So if you look at the score obtained by the student has scored 12 points. 3 points for the medium question that he got right, 3 points for the medium hard question, and 5 points. Sorry, 4 points for the medium hard and 5 points for the hard question. So total 12 points are scored by the student, and the accuracy is 60%. He got 3 out of the 5 questions correct. Okay. Let's take another example very quickly. So another student started with a medium question, but he got the first question wrong. So the algorithm gives him easy, medium. Then he gets it wrong. So the next question is easy, which he gets right. So the next question is easy, medium, which he gets right. So the last question also is medium, and he gets that question right as well. So if you compare the score of this student and the accuracy of this student with the first one, you will see that this student has just scored 6 points and the accuracy is still 60%. Both of them have the same accuracies, but very, very different scores very, very different scores that they end up with. And that's how the adaptive algorithm is going to function. Now, GMAT is not as this harsh, as in it does not adapt the difficulty level after every question. It most likely changes the difficulty level after a set of 3 or 4 questions. They look at the average accuracy in those 3, 4 questions, and that's how it adapts. Okay, and it's not completely adaptive also. Again, those are very complex things which I'm getting into. I'm not going to cover all of that, but think of it like this, that it is in a block of 3, 4 questions. That's how it adapts your difficulty level. But this is a simplified example to understand it. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to share my enhanced score report. Like, this is the enhanced score report of verbal section of my attempt. Okay, and I'm going to help you understand how the algorithm works with this report, and very important lessons we are going to take. So we talked about one thing around timing, but we're going to also talk about a lot around timing, difficulty levels, how you should perform, and all of it. So this ESR will help us build that case. So let's understand how to read this first. Okay, so in the first quarter there are 8 questions. Like 8 core questions are here, out of which this chart tells me that I got 25% of them wrong. So I had 2 mistakes in the first quarter. In the second quarter, we have 7 questions where I made again 2 mistakes. In the third quarter also there are 7 questions. In the fourth quarter also there are 8 questions. In the fourth quarter there are 8 questions. So the total number of mistakes I made was 7. Okay, and these are the 30 scored questions that are there out of 36 questions which are there on GMAT verbal. Okay, remember this point. Okay, there are 6 experimental questions. Some of you might ask me, how do I know whether which is an experimental question? There's no way to know it. Where do the experimental questions come? There's no way to know it. It can come at any point of time. You cannot know which one is experimental, which one is scored. But there are only 30 scored questions in the test, and GMAT only provides you data for the scored ones, not for the experimental ones. All right, so this is how we read this data. So I made 7 mistakes and I got a 41 on verbal. All right, so this is what you can get out of it. Now let's take another enhanced score report with us. Okay, so this is again the same report which I showed you earlier. This is my scorecard, and I'm going to show you the other scorecard, and I want you to predict the verbal score of that student. Okay, so here is the scorecard of the other student. If you can see on your screen, this student has made 8 mistakes instead of 7 mistakes, which I made. Okay, and there were 4 mistakes in the first quarter, 1 mistake in the second quarter, no mistakes in the third quarter, and 3 mistakes in the last one. Can you guys tell me and predict what is the verbal score of this student? What was the verbal score of this student rather? And I'm going to give you a minute to think about it. Take your time, think about it, and tell me in the chat. I'm going to be muted for a minute. In the meantime, you think about this particular thing. Okay, I'm going to be muted, and I'm going to stop my cam in the meantime. So you have 1 minute to think about it, and let me know what are your thoughts in the chat here. Okay, so I'm receiving a lot of answers. Uh, Vanu says 37, Satish says 38, Nagarajan 29, okay. 32, 35, Prashant says 39 to 40, very similar ranges, okay. What about other people? What do you guys think? And do think about this. The result might shock you. Some of you might be shocked. Again, this is one case study which I kind of cover in many other webinars also, but I will take up more case studies as well. Okay, so please feel free to let me know what do you think about it. And if any one of you has any ESRs that you need your help with, or the analysis, or you want any help on the strategy part, you can actually discuss a one-on-one call with me as well. I'm going to share the link to do that. I've just shared the link to do this. You can click on this link and schedule a one-on-one call with me if you want any help on your ESR analysis or your GMAT strategy related help. Okay, so thank you so much for the entire thing. Akshit says it should be around 38. He did not well in the first half, but he could have covered up in the second and the third quarter, then faced good value questions in the last block, but dropped accuracy again. Okay, so let's see what was the result. And the result was this guy actually scored just a 30 on GMAT. Just a 30 on GMAT verbal, not GMAT, 30 on GMAT verbal with 8 mistakes. Just one extra mistake, and you're looking at a verbal 30. How many of you are feeling that GMAT is harsh? Or you don't accept this result, that okay, I don't understand why it happens. And one of you had a question that your accuracy also depends on the experimental question also contribute to the difficulty level of the next set of questions. Again, Ayush, ideally they should not, there's not enough conclusive data because GMAT does not provide you data on experimental questions whether you have gotten them right or wrong. But looking at I've looked at many ESRs, and also I have a feeling that it might impact, but I cannot be sure about it because there's no data to base our understanding on. It's all based on some assumptions that I'm making there, but it might as well impact. So anyway, you cannot really understand which is an experimental question or which is a scored question. So you have to treat all of them as scored questions anyway. So the strategy should not really depend on that particular aspect. Okay, so this is the difference which that one extra question can create. And if you're really shocked by this, think of it like this. Again, I'm just adding one more case study to this. So 7 mistakes, this was my score. This was verbal 41, which I achieved. This student which we talked about, 8 mistakes, 58 percentile, verbal 30. I have seen a person making just 9 mistakes in the entire test and still getting a verbal 21. And we need to understand how this really works, why this really happened. GMAT is one of the most standardized tests. GMAT is one of the most best, like most well measured and accurate tests that is there in the entire world today, because the algorithm is equipped to help to get a clear picture of what is a capability, what is a true capability. It does not work on accuracy as a metric. It works on which questions can you get right. What is the capability of getting a easy, medium, and hard question right? That's how it works. And let me explain that part to you. Okay. Uh, Nagarajan, I'm going to talk about your question as well. So if you look at, again, I've just switched the sides. So left side is the student who made 8 mistakes and verbal 30. And this is the difficulty level chart across the various quarters. So if you look at the first student over here, like in this first quarter, in my opinion, in my understanding, out of the 4 mistakes that he made, he would have made at least 3 of them in the very first half of the first quarter also, because of which the difficulty level of the next set of questions in the first quarter itself went down. So his overall difficulty level, if you see in the first quarter, is slightly lower than the student on the right hand side. So that's one thing. Second thing was, because of his poor performance in the first quarter, the second quarter difficulty level, if you see the average difficulty of the questions that he got right, which is indicated by this blue dot that you see, is around easy medium. It's just around easy medium difficulty level. But if you look at the student on the right hand side, the average difficulty level of the questions that he got right in the second quarter, this is somewhere around medium hard. And if I bring them side by side, you'll be able to see that difference. So right till now, you guys are looking at the accuracy, 7 versus 8 mistakes. But what you need to really look at is the difference in the difficulty levels that the students have achieved, like the difficulty level of the questions that they have gotten right or wrong. That's something you need to look at. And that's why you see that huge a difference in their scores. And even if you look at the third quarter, both of them had 100% accuracy there. But if you look at the third quarter performance also, the student is still getting medium hard questions right in the third quarter, but the student is still stuck at the easy medium level. Okay, and that's why the algorithm functions on not accuracy but your skill level. So accuracy is not the right metric to look at, skill is the right metric to look at, which basically means the ability of getting questions of any difficulty level correct. So to get a 700 plus on GMAT, you need to first make the algorithm serve you hard questions, and that can only be done if you are actually doing well on the first two quarters. Okay, that is something which is important. And Nagarajan, that brings me to your question. So Nagarajan said, how best can one salvage if the first 10 questions don't go that well? So Nagarajan, there is a possibility of you doing well if you don't do well on the first 10, but that the mistake should not be in the first 4 or 5 questions. As in, you can do one mistake or two mistakes, but it should not be more than two. If you're making more mistakes in the first 4 or 5 itself, then honestly speaking, there is sometimes no point of return, to be honest, unless you're targeting, let's say, just around, uh, how do I say, around, let's say, 70 percentile. If your target is more than that, you need to get a very high accuracy in the first 4 or 5 questions. Now, if you make some mistakes in the later, let's say from question number 6 to 9, maybe two mistakes there, you can still come back. Like if you look at my case, it's not like I did not make any mistakes. I made two mistakes in the first quarter. It's not like I did not make any mistakes. But again, those were towards the later half. And how do I know it? Look at the difficulty level here of incorrect questions and the difficulty level here of the incorrect questions. So you will be clearly understanding that I got slightly more difficult questions wrong. So you can still come back by having a better accuracy in the later half of the first quarter. But if you make a lot of mistakes in the first quarter, first half itself, then it's a problem. Okay. And make understand this part. That brings me to the point that Devi is saying, does this mean we should spend more time in our best effort in the first and second quarter? I'm going to talk about that, Devi. Not really. That's not the exact inference that I would draw. I'll come to that. I'll build up that inference with more data points and more case studies. But understand it this way, that the first quarter, first 4 or 5 questions are simple questions, guys. Don't be pressurized about the first 4 or 5 questions. You should not start taking them too seriously, because that's another problem. If you start taking questions too seriously, you will double think, you will be conscious, you will overthink sometimes, you might as well make mistakes because of that. So be natural, because the first half or first quarter are going to be simple questions. If you have the skills, you will get it right, because those are simple questions. You will not make the errors. If you don't have the skills, then nothing can actually help you get them right. Even if you spend more time, you can't get them right for sure. You can get them right on some days, but on some other days you will falter. So if the problem is with the skill, you need to fix that before the test. And I'm going to talk about it a lot more. But in order to get to that 700 plus kind of a score, you need to first make the algorithm serve you hard questions. And that can only be achieved if you get high accuracy on easy and medium questions. In fact, I was having another word with another student of mine, like just yesterday or day before yesterday. And he was saying that, okay, I get an accuracy about 80% in easy and 70% in medium questions. And in hard questions, my accuracy is 57%. I should focus my attention on hard questions. I said, no, you should first focus your attention on easy and medium questions. Bring that accuracy number up to a 90% mark. Because if you don't do that, the possibility of the algorithm serving you hard questions diminishes. Then doesn't really matter if your accuracy is high on hard questions. If you're not going to get hard questions at all, then what are you going to do with that accuracy? So first thing you need to do is build the capability to get the easy and medium questions right as close to 100% as possible. Then once the questions are hard questions are served to you, you need to get them right as well. Okay, you need to have the right mental space to get them right, and you can only get them right by building the right skills. It is not possible to get the hard questions right by giving extra time. Okay, that's a myth that most people have in mind. You need to have the right skills and you need to understand how to apply them, and I'm going to talk a lot about it. But let's take up one important question as well. Today, none of you asked me, thankfully, around this question, but many people tell me, okay, what is the importance of last few questions? I missed the last few questions in the GMAT. How does it impact my score? And this is something which, as I said, I commonly hear from students on a daily basis almost. Now, what is that to do with the last few questions? And let me show you another ESR, guys. Okay, so this is another ESR report in front of you, and let me count the number of mistakes made by the student. So this student has made just 5 mistakes in the entire verbal section. Okay. In the entire verbal section, the student only made 5 mistakes. And you look at the score of the student. And a little while back, I showed you the score, my score, 7 questions wrong, 41. And you look at this student. 100% accuracy is there in the last quarter. 100%. And even the second and third quarter, the accuracy is pretty decent. Okay. Vansh, I'm going to answer your question, really important. But in short, if you want to ask me, I don't recommend skipping 1-2 questions at regular intervals. You should do skipping in between. I'll tell you when and why. Okay. Later on, but not now. So what do you see out of this? And I have spoken to this student, and she told me that I know I was not feeling comfortable in the beginning of the test, and the first 3 questions I was not comfortable. I most likely got them wrong. I made a lot of mistakes there, and she validated this with observations. And this is again data which is speaking. What do we see from this? Okay, even with 100% accuracy in the last quarter and just 5 mistakes, a verbal score of 34. I can actually show you the difficulty level chart of the student also, but again, this is going to be very similar to that 30 verbal 30, so I did not bring it over here. But you look at this chart and you understand this. This student made 3 mistakes in the very first half of the first quarter. That's why the difficulty level always stayed low. So it's not about the last quarter that actually impacts your score. I'm not saying last quarter is not important. But if you're just focusing on the last quarter becomes important when you're targeting a verbal score of 42 plus or 40 plus or a quant score of 50 or 51. But before that, if you're stuck around the 30 mark or you're stuck around that 42 or 44 mark in quant and you're thinking just about the last quarter that you could not complete the test, then you're focusing on the wrong thing. You should first focus on the initial quarters where you're making those mistakes and focus on the application gaps. Okay. So yes, Nagarjun, you're very right. That's how it basically works. So you have to give the algorithm the science that you have the capability of getting the easy and medium questions right, because they also know that in the hard questions you can get some questions wrong, and they give you that flexibility. But again, like obviously that hard questions also matter. It's not like you can just get them wrong, so you have to get them right also. So it will, the hard questions will create a difference whether you get a 700 or a 740 or a 760 or a 770. But to reach that number, you need to get the first questions correct. And in fact, I don't have the ESR report of one of my students. His name is Pierre. So I'm just sharing his details with you. This guy scored a verbal 44. This is the maximum that we have helped the student reach till date in verbal. Okay. So this guy scored a verbal 44. And I was speaking with him. He did not have time for the last 3 questions. Okay, for the 3 last questions that he had, he did not have any time. He just marked them randomly. Now, he did not order an ESR because he got a good score, so he was not really bothered about the ESR. If we had the ESR, we would have looked at that. So he did not do well in the last quarter. Okay, 3 questions he marked randomly within 30 seconds. He still had a verbal 44. That's a very telling fact. So Rohana has a very important question. How heavily are we penalized if you miss even one question entirely due to time crunch? So if you miss one question, it is penalized more heavily than getting it incorrect. So you should never miss questions. So if you have 30 seconds left, just like Pierre did, you should mark those questions. Don't try to solve another question in those 30 seconds. Just mark whatever is left and complete the test. That's more important. Okay, so verbal 44 is what Pierre ended up with. I hope we had this ESR. I could have shown it to you the importance of the last quarter, but I've gotten something from Quant, because a lot of students do well on Quant, don't do well on verbal, do really well on Quant, don't do really well on verbal, and still order the ESR for the analysis. So we have some data from Quant to elaborate. Look at this guy. He has scored a verbal Quant 50. Okay. and look at the last quarter performance. Look at the last quarter performance. He has gotten 3 questions incorrect in the last quarter. Okay, 3 mistakes in the last quarter. Okay, and I know this guy personally. Yeah, he was feeling a little short on time. He had about 1 minute 20 seconds or something in the last quarter on an average. He was feeling short on time, but he gave more attention to some questions, did them properly, and for the last 2-3 questions, he just marked them randomly. And you see the score, Quant 50. What mattered more was first, second, and the third quarter. He had a very good performance over there. I will also be sharing my own ESR snapshot. I also scored a Quant 50, and I made 1 mistake in the first quarter, 2 mistakes in the second quarter, and 3 mistakes in the last quarter. I also had a Q50. So what does it tell us? It tells us that if you're just focusing your attention on completing the test, then you're focusing your attention on the wrong thing. You need to focus on the right thing, which is to build the capability of getting questions right consistently, and more importantly, the ones that matter the more. Okay, that's what you need to do. Now, let's come to the next point then. How do you optimize the time taken to solve questions during the practice phase of learning? And that's one important question that a lot of you are talking about, because understand this part. All of what I'm saying is from the test taking strategy point of view. It is going to help you on the test day, but only and only if you fix the things beforehand. If you don't fix the things before then, trust me, no strategy is going to work for you. If someone tells you that, okay, this strategy is going to help you get a 700 out of the blue, he's just trying to make a fool out of you. No strategy works unless you optimize your time taken to solve questions during the practice phase of learning. Test taking strategies can help you get 10, 20 points extra, 30 points extra, basically, or correct your thought process if you're thinking something wrong. Let's say you're thinking about skipping questions in between, or you're thinking about giving more attention to the last questions. These things can be corrected, but first thing that you need to do is improve your timing during the practice phase, not in the mock phase, during the practice phase of learning. And I'm going to talk for the next 10 to 20 minutes around that, and then we will take more case studies about people who have improved and how they changed their test taking strategies. Okay, so let's quickly cover this up. So first thing that you need to understand is identify the core timing issue. Try and understand why are you taking that additional time that you are taking. Okay, why are you taking that additional time that you are taking to solve the questions? Is it because of the concept gaps? For example, let's say identify if you're spending extra time on specific questions. Maybe boldface in CR is where you're taking extra time to solve. Maybe PNC in word problems, permutation, combination, or probability in word problems is where you're taking extra time. Or comparison in sentence correction. Again, pardon me for this. This is comparison in sentence correction, that is where you are taking extra time. So first understand whether it's a concept specific thing or a question specific thing, or is it application specific? What is application related? It basically means whether the issue is with a specific module. For example, you are taking extra time for CR in general. Understand that whether it is related to question or related to entire module. That is very important. Okay, so Devi, you're right. Whatever strategies I'm talking about, first you need to incorporate that in some of the mocks yourself, and then check it out, the outcome that you get, and then only apply it on the test day. It's like these, just as you see in many ads, these stunts are not supposed to be tried at home without supervision. So make sure you are trying the stunts before on the mocks and see which one works better for you, and then apply it. But this will work because this is something which has worked for many students in the past who worked with us. So again, so first need to understand in order to work on the timing issues is whether it is specific to certain concepts or is it application related in general. So let's take why this is important. This is important because you need to understand, like you need to tackle them in a different way. Okay, and Mohit, I'm going to talk about that. Okay, if you're taking 10 minutes for RC patches, and this is where I'm going to talk about the approach part. Okay, how do you improve your timing? Okay, so if it is related to concept specific, you need to first understand where are you facing these issues. So if you have an error log of your own where you maintain the timing and everything, that is good. You can actually look at that, understand which specific areas you are bad at. If you're a GMAT with student, then all this data is there on the dashboard itself. You can go to the verbal section or the Quant section, go to the in-depth analysis. For example, SC is selected. I select the timing and see how much time am I taking. So if you see the student is taking extra time on pronouns, about pronouns is one thing where he's taking extra time. Modifiers is another area where he's taking extra time. Comparison is another area where he's taking extra time. Similarly, in CR, if I go to the timing tab, I can say boldface, paradox, weekend is where he's taking extra time. But if I just go back a little, you will see that the student is taking optimal time for almost assumption related questions, flaw related questions. So those questions are fine. But from the other areas, he's taking extra time. Okay, so that way you can go and understand what is the area issues. And even in quant, you can see that, okay, in divisibility, this student is taking a lot of extra time. In LC and GCD, is taking a lot of extra time. Whereas in the other areas, his timing seems to be perfect. So first thing you need to do is identify exactly where is that you're taking that extra time if it is related to specific concepts. So if you have an error log of your own, you can do that. If you don't have an error log, if you're working with GMAT Viz, you will get all this error log automatically maintained by the database. Okay, so we have an AI driven engine. A lot of things are there on the platform. But again, this webinar is about GMAT algorithm. So I'm not going to talk about GMAT Viz a lot. So think of it like this, that first understand what are the concept specific issues that you have with related to timing. And then you need to work on the timing for this concepts. And how do you work on that? First of all, the step one is review the topic. Go through the concept once again. Understand the question. What is it expecting out of you? Cover any concept related issues that you have in that. Because if it is a concept related issue, for example, if you are not doing divisibility questions in the right amount of time, or PNC questions in the right amount of time, or even boldface questions in the right amount of time, most likely you don't have a strong understanding of that concept in itself. So make sure you devote enough time on the concept. First, cover the concept gaps, understand, build a strong base on that concept first. Then the second step you do is you take about 10 questions, one at a time, one question at a time. Take 10 questions. After solving each of them, and why am I saying one at a time? It's very important for you to do this. Don't do all 10 questions at once, because once you do all 10 questions at once, you don't remember exactly how you solved the first question step by step. You kind of tend to forget it by the time you reach the 10th question. But if you do just one question at a time, you exactly remember that, okay, what are the various steps that I followed for every single, after every single thing. Then when you match it with a proper solution, you are able to identify the wastes in the process. And some examples of waste could be rereading the sentence, rereading the argument because you did not understand it the right way in the first go. Second identification of waste could be that you quick in a DS question, you directly jump to statement 1 and statement 2 without inferring the right things from the question stem, which led you to extra time being spent. So look at the solution. This is where the solution is going to come into picture. Look at the solution, ensure that you are matching your understanding line by line with the solution, and identify these ways. And if you do them on 10 questions, one at a time, you'll most likely get to know exactly where are you wasting that time, because that identification is very important. And then you do 30 questions or 40 questions maybe on the same topic in sets of 10. Then you can do it in sets of 10 and gradually reduce the time. So let's say if you have identified the waste, okay, you are taking 4 minutes initially, and you now realize that, okay, these are the areas where I'm wasting time. And after reducing that waste, you are able to bring it down to 2.5 minutes. So what you need to now do is take 10 question sets 3 times or 4 times. In the first set, take 2.5 minutes. In the second set, take 2 minutes 20 seconds. In the third set, take 2 minutes 10 seconds, and then gradually you reduce the time. Become comfortable with that topic. That's very, very important. Okay. So Vyom has an interesting question. Vyom says RC and CR drain too much time. They tend to be really boring. How do you improve on that? So the problem is with the word boring, Vyom. Till the find them boring, it's a problem. See, I understand a lot of text is something which you don't like to read on a daily basis. I don't like to read many things which are there on GMAT on a daily basis. But for the sake of the test, I need to take interest in that. I need to understand the context really well. And a lot of people come to me and say that, okay, it's difficult for me to understand the context in this passage if it is related to this particular genre. And trust me, guys, whenever I do an exercise and I ask them, okay, give me a tough passage that you feel you are not able to understand, and I'll make you understand that passage. And what I see is they're not understanding the passage, not because they don't understand the genre. It's more about because they don't want to understand it. They don't spend enough time, or even if they want, they don't spend enough time to do it. So break down things, understand that better. You have to engross yourself, Vyom, in understanding it, even if you find it boring. So you have to get that out of your head. Okay, you have to contextualize. That's the only solution. I hope there was a shortcut, but there's no shortcut there. So you have to understand, you have to contextualize properly. Okay. Now let's talk about the application part. Now, how do you work on the application part? Now, working on the application part, and this is application part. When I say application, I mean when you have a problem with overall modules, as in just like some of you mentioned that, okay, I am struggling with RC. Some of you mentioned I'm struggling with CR also. So if you are facing a problem with an top module itself overall, then what you should do? In that case, you need to understand the problem. See, many a times, and this is very common thing which I hear from many of my students, uh, when they face timing issues in any topic, their first resort is to cut down on time by cutting corners. And how they do that is they will start reading the questions them quickly, because they feel that, okay, they have to spend a lot of time on the answer choices. This is more true for verbal, but even true for quant. They feel that they have to do a lot of calculations, so they have to save time on reading the question stem. So they read the question stem quickly, which basically leads to a rough understanding of what's being stated. They understand what's being stated, but only to a rough level. They don't have a very clear understanding. With that rough understanding, they're able to eliminate 2 to 3 choices confidently. But the problem happens when they get stuck with 2, 3 close choices. They will not be able to get the close choices clarified, and that's when the problem happens. Now, what do people do when they get stuck with close choices? What is that they do? Generally, in that case, the next thing which comes to their mind is they will reread the question, or they will reread the choices multiple times. Okay, they will reread the multiple times, the choices in the questions multiple times, and then in the end they mark some answer as time is running out. So if you look at this entire thing, if you look at this entire workflow, the problem happened in the very beginning itself. You started to save extra some time by reading the questions time quickly. You could have saved 20-30 seconds there, because you just spent 20-30 seconds on reading the questions time quickly. You were able to eliminate some of the choices confidently. Till this point, you have the time saving with you. But the moment you get stuck with 2, 3 close choices, everything goes downhill. You spend extra time on rereading, and that's when you end up spending 2 to 3.5 minutes on every question. And trust me, many people, when they speak to me, many people who are taking extra time take extra time just because of this entire problem, that they reread stuff. They don't spend enough time on the question stem. So if you're not spending enough time on the question stem properly, then it will lead to extra time. And now, why do you don't spend extra time on question stem properly? There could be 2 possible reasons behind it. One reason is you don't know how to approach it the right way. If that is a problem, that's still easy. Like, that's something you need to work upon a lot. It will require a lot of effort on your side, and conscious effort on your side. You will need to change the approach. There's no shortcut on it. The second reason could be you are worried about timing. So if you're worried about timing, again, in the webinar you would have understood how to pace yourself. I'm going to talk about the pacing in depth also again. But if your approach is wrong, you need to first work on that approach. Okay, so Akshit has a question. Akshit, you'll not be allowed to mouth words if you have the habit of speaking out when you are reading questions. Proctor will most likely interrupt you. So then the GMAT Online is not meant for you, in my opinion. So that's how it is. Ashita also has a question. Let me read it. I got a 50 and for 27 in GMAT Online. I could feel I was just slipping through the initial questions of verbal. I can get a grip in the beginning of verbal. So good point, Ashita. I'll definitely take it up. So I have those covered in the web slides today. Now, if you don't have the right approach, you need to improve the approach. And there are many different approaches which are going on in the industry. Many people teach many different approaches. Even the top institutes teach some really shortcut driven approaches. And that is something which I came across as a student when I was studying for the first time. And sadly, this approaches did not work for me. For example, in RC, I heard an approach which talked about reading the first and last line of every paragraph properly, and then jumping to the questions and coming back to that relevant paragraph only if needed. That's one thing which was taught to me. I worked up on it, never helped. Second approach is one which I stuck to for a long time, again did not help me, was reading the questions passage quickly in 2 minutes and take a mental note of what is being said, and then refer back to the passage for every question. Did not help me at all. Third approach was read the question first, so you know what you're looking for. But many of these approaches don't really work. So it's very important that if you're struggling with the application part, if you're struggling in a module entirely, you're most likely approaching it the wrong way. You need to improve the approach part. And the sad part about this all the shortcut focused approaches which we have talked about here is, it will save you some time in when you do the first read. It will lead you to 2 to 3 minutes. You will be able to read it properly, like quickly, sorry, not properly, but you will only have a rough idea of what's mentioned, but you will end up rereading the questions for each question, and then you will end up spending 1.5 minutes per question. So your overall time per passage again comes down to 8 to 9 minutes only. It does not come down below that. If you bring it down below that, your accuracy suffers significantly. And even with this, your accuracy suffers. But what successful students do is they read properly the first time. They contextualize better the first time, even if it requires 4 to 5 minutes to do it. And that's when they get a crystal clear understanding of what is being stated. And then they eliminate answer choices confidently. And they only need to spend about 40 seconds per question because of their better understanding of the passage itself. And the average time in this case for the students is 7 to 8 minutes. So your timing is better, your accuracy is better if you focus on understanding the right approach, focusing on reading the passage properly the first time. Okay, so what is the right way to read RC passages? Again, I'm talking about RC today, just a little bit about RC, because the objective of this webinar is not to talk about specific topics. It's more about the strategy. So if you're interested in knowing about specific topics, I'll be sharing a few links with you. You can actually check out our free trial as well. I'll just a second. I'll just share the link for creating a free trial account on GMAT Viz. You can learn a lot around the strategies, and it will also help you with a personalized study plan. So you can do that, but the webinar objective is around the strategy, overall test taking strategy. So I'm not going to delve deeper into all the things. I'm just going to talk a little bit about the RC part. So what you need to do in RC is you need to first think like the author. So you need to put yourself in the author's shoes. Try to understand his point of view. If you're just distancing yourself and try to focus on that detail, it's not going to work. You need to understand why this piece of information is written, because 85% questions on GMAT RC are going to be inferential in nature. So make sure you do that. And how you do that, it's not just about reading, it's about contextualizing, it's about processing the information as you read. And there are multiple steps involved in it. First step is you need to break sentences into smaller chunks, and this has to be done more importantly for the genres that you're not comfortable with. For example, in my case, I don't need to do this as often in science related or economics related passages, but I need to do this more often in the humanities related passages because that's something which I find difficult to relate to. So break the sentences into small chunks to derive their meaning. For each and every subsequent sentence that you read, ensure that you relate back to the previous sentence. You need to relate back to previous sentences continuously to understand what the author is trying to do. And in order to relate back, what helps you is the transition words and the conjunctions. Make sure you make good use of these two things, and that will help you really, really well. Okay. The idea is to summarize every passage and properly everything. So if you want to learn the right approach, there are again four steps that you need to follow. The first step is understanding the method. So I just talked about the method a little. So the first thing you need to do is understand the method for that particular area. Get a good understanding of the methodology. First step. Second step is you need to solve 15 questions by taking one question at a time. Again, one question at a time is very, very critical, guys. Make sure you do one question at a time. Understand the solution properly. Review the explanation, avoid deviations from the method. The reason I'm saying again one question at a time is make sure that you are avoiding deviations from the method completely. Okay, so that is something which is very, very critical for you guys to do. All right, and I'm going to show how to do this as well. Again, I'm not just going to tell you, I'm going to show you exactly how to do this. So let's say this is a CR question that you solved. Okay, you solve the CR question. After the CR question, you will, like, if you're a GMAT student, you'll have a very detailed explanation of the CR question. So for example, let's say after this particular sentence, the first sentence which is there, we actually analyzed this sentence and we came up with this inference that is there stated over here. So what you need to do is, even if you get the question right, you need to read the solution. You need to ask yourself, when I read the first sentence and only the first sentence, not the second, not the third, not the fourth, just the first sentence, did I draw the same level of inference or not? If you did not, then there is a gap in your understanding. There is a gap in the methodology. You need to improve on it right away. And this is something we teach you first. It's not like we just give you a solution and ask you to do it. We teach you how to do this first. And then we ask you to actually tally your approach. Similarly, you will read the second line and you will tell yourself that, okay, when I read the second line and the first line, these two lines, did I come to the same inference which is stated over here? Did I have the same level of inference which is stated over here? If not, then you have still done a mistake even if you've gotten the question correct. Then same thing you will do with the third sentence. Make sure that the inference is same, and then with the fourth sentence and make sure that the inference is same. And if you're thinking that, okay, isn't this gonna be a lot of taking a lot of time? Isn't this gonna be more time consuming than anything else? Then sadly you're wrong. You need to understand this, that in the beginning you might feel that this is more time consuming, it will take you time, but if you do this process repeatedly, it will help you improve the timing significantly. It will help you understand how this thing works. You will be able to get to this outcome much faster, and your accuracy will be also high. Now, one common problem that people face, that is that they don't know a resource which provide the solution in such a methodical way. In fact, when I was a student, I was going through all the sources. Most of the cases, what I used to see was most solutions will only tell me why A is wrong, B is wrong, C is wrong, and D is correct. That's all it's limited to. Very few people provide this level of analysis. And that's why when we created GMAT Viz, we actually focused on the solutions to a lot. Actually, we gave about twice this time which is spent on creating the question on writing the solution. We wrote the solutions really well, and that's something we did do even today. We do a thorough work on the revision solution to make sure that you follow a methodical approach and a consistent approach so that you are able to learn from the solutions and improve your scores. That's something which is very important. And for that, we even came up with the idea of the concept boosters, where you give you one question at a time and you get the solution right away. You analyze the solution and figure out the gaps in your application. And each question in the concept booster is handpicked by us. It covers a different aspect of the same topic so that you're able to understand how to apply the methodology for every single topic. And that's one of the biggest reasons why we have the highest score improvement in the industry. Today, we have 111 points average score improvement we have provided average score improvement of 111 points, which is much higher than any other player in the industry. Even the top notch brands that you know of, the improvement is around 60 to 70 points. And that's because of this entire focus on concept boosters. So if you are struggling with the application, as I said, first you need to understand whether your timing is because of application or concepts. If it is because of application, if you remember, I said, first understand the method, solve 15 questions one at a time, understand the approach clearly, deviations, mark the deviations, understand the approach. Then you need to master the approach to reduce the time down. Because remember, when you're learning the right approach, right away your time will not come down. If you expect that, okay, I learned the let's say for RC, we use the involved and evolved reading approach. So I learned the involved and evolved reading approach. I used to take 3 minutes for RC passages earlier, per question, 3 minutes I used to take earlier. Now my time should come down to 1.5 minutes right away. Right away, it won't happen. You'll most likely take 3 minutes or 2.5 minutes still. But your focus should be on getting the approach right. Because if you're getting the approach right, once you focus more solving or more questions, you will be able to bring down the time. But if you don't get the approach right, doesn't matter how many questions you solve, your time is not going to come down. So what you need to do is first learn the application of concepts by doing that, and then practice 30-40 questions using the approach regularly. And even then only you'll be able to internalize the process, and your time will reduce gradually. It will come down gradually, 10 seconds each in after every 10 questions that you solve. And in order to get this timing down, this timing down, you need to review the solutions for every question. That is very critical, guys. Very critical. I hope in this part everything is clear to you. Any questions to this part, anyone? Any questions to this part, guys? Now I'm gonna put all this into practice with a case in point. Another case in point. Basically, we will be taking up this case. Akshat, how he utilized his ESR reports, how he utilized them to understand where he is going wrong and how you improved his timing, test taking strategies, all of it. And in just 24 days, he was able to improve from a 650 to a 730 kind of a number, which was a significant improvement given that he just worked on that for 24 days. Okay, so let's understand this part. So first thing that you need to do do in order to achieve this kind of an improvement, and this is something which is very, very important, is that you need to identify the root causes. And that's what Akshat did. again, I'm gonna take a break. I'm gonna take the Ashutosh's question. He says, I have an issue from childhood. I have not read grammar seriously and depended upon my intuition-based grammar. I've tried to correct it many times, but in SC, my mind first goes to intuition, then rules. So Ashutosh, very valid point. Many a times, trust me, reading, unlearning something is more difficult than learning something new. So sadly, intuition-based grammar is not gonna work out. You have to focus on learning the meaning-based approach and understanding the logical part of grammar, not the typical grammatical terminologies that okay, this is a gerund, this is a participle. You need to understand the logic part of grammar because that's what is tested on GMAT. So you have to unlearn those methods, sadly, and you have to apply, force yourself to do that. And the good thing is, if you force yourself to do that, even for a month, you should be able to do it. Okay, so do that. So what Akshat did was Akshat looked at his ESR and identified that it is CR and RC that he's struggling with. Clearly, that's one thing which he was struggling with. Second thing, if you see on the screen, again, this is more related to the test taking strategy. He was not able to manage his timing under anxiety. So what he did was in the first quarter, he did really well. He was able to solve get 88% accuracy. Just one mistake he did, but he took a lot of time. And he probably did not understand the algorithm that well at that point of time, or maybe he was just too anxious because of that. And under the flow, he just started going through the second quarter questions very quickly. So he started off well. He took up some extra time to do it, but then what he did was he tried to complete the test. He focused on saving time on the next few questions that he solves, and because of which probably that anxiety and all of that combined took a toll on his accuracy. And you see his number of incorrect questions went up significantly. That's when the problem started to happen. So he realized that he needs to improve on the weak areas in verbal, and he also needs to improve his anxiety issues and his timing strategies overall. And what he did was he took up his issues one at a time. So in the 650 attempt, you already saw his accuracy, like percentile in all three areas. In the 730 attempt, he was able to change it to this. So his SC stayed at the same level. He focused a little on SC to ensure that it stays at the same level. He improved his CR from a 44 to a 91. He improved his RC from a 55 to a 72 in just 24 days. And I'll tell you how he did that, because I'm sure that's going to be the next question that's going to come in your mind. So let me take that up as well. So how he did that was he started focusing on improving his understanding of the methodologies. Okay, so he was a GMAT student. He made sure that he focused on the methodologies that we teach in our course. So we have this framework-driven pre-thinking approach in CR. So he started improving in an understanding of it, and how he did that was he and this is something which he was telling me about in his interview itself, in his debrief itself, when I was having a word with him later on. So basically, what he did was he reviewed the solutions in depth for every single question, even the ones that he got correct, because he knew that it is not just enough to get a question right. It is important to know whether he got it right for the right reasons. Okay, so I'm just taking some snapshot out of his entire interview with me. But if you want to look at his entire interview, I'm just gonna share the link with you as well in the comments here, so you can use this link and view his entire interview as well. Okay, so once I'm going to touch upon the advised skipping strategy also. Don't worry about it. That's going to be covered in the webinar. Okay. So the next thing that he did was, when he was reviewing these solutions, he also identified the patterns in the incorrect answers. So in GMAT, the incorrect answers are incorrect for a reason. There is a very valid reason. That's one very good thing about GMAT. There's always a valid reason behind every incorrect answer. There's no gray area as such. So in some cases, there are distortions. Some cases, there is an out of scope argument. Some cases, there is a irrelevant point. There is an opposite point. So all these elements were there. So what he used to do was, whenever he used to solve a question, he used to write it down that, okay, A is incorrect because it is distorted. This is incorrect because this is out of scope, and so on. And then he used to match this with the explanations to make sure that whatever reason he's predicting for the incorrect answer, that also matches. Not just the correct ones, the incorrect one also matches. And at GMAT, we make sure that we classify each answer choice against this category. So he was able to match it up properly. And then he revisited his weak areas, specific topics, concepts that he was weak at, to improve his understanding further. And that's how he was able to improve his score to a 730. And this is about the weak area, CR and RC, how it worked upon it. So that's one part of the entire thing. The next thing that he did was to reduce exam anxiety. And please, guys, those of you who are retakers, this is probably one of the most important lessons from the entire session that you're going to take up. Okay, please make sure that you focus on this part. in order to reduce your exam anxiety, this is something which has worked really, really well for most of my students. Always. Okay. He reduced the study time to half. Before the 650 attempt, he was cramming a lot of time. He was a working professional. He had very less time available. He was trying to push himself too hard, and that was taking a toll on his skill level. Just a second, guys. So that was taking a toll on his skill level. So one thing he did was he reduced the study time to half. Okay. He was studying 4 hours every day earlier. He reduced it to 2 hours, 1.5, 2 hours. And what he did was he did not focus on cramming too many questions. He did not solve too many questions. Rather, what he focused on was quality over quantity. Many people come to me and say that how many questions should I solve? How many marks should I take before my next attempt? I say that's the wrong question that you're asking, guys. What you need to ask is, how do I approach my prep in a way that I'm able to understand where my core problems are and work upon those core problems. So focus on quality, focus on learning from each question. That's a very important change that Akshat did. Okay. And when you actually reduce the time to half, one very important thing which happens with you is you distance yourself from the prep. You do not get too engrossed in it, and that helps in understanding the application related errors. If it is related to concepts, that is something we can work on by putting extra time. But if it is related to application, which is generally the case with people who are stuck around the 650 range, uh, distancing yourself actually helps a lot. In fact, one of my students just messaged today. She was able to improve her score from a 600 to a 680 just by, like, she distanced herself a little, worked on application gaps, and she has taken the GMAT multiple times earlier. So again, distancing oneself is very important in order to achieve this. And he also, when he started his test, again, this is something which I want to show you as data point also. When he started his test, he did not, in the 730 attempt, this is 730 attempt that I'm talking about. In the first quarter, he did not do as well. He made 3 mistakes, but those mistakes were not in the first half of the first quarter. That was one good thing. He made it towards the later half of the first quarter. And if he felt that he was feeling anxious, also a little anxiety kicked in. He spent a good amount of time. If you see the time spent on incorrect questions, 2 minutes 29 seconds is the average time. So most likely the time spent of incorrect questions was about a lot higher, around 3 minutes 40 seconds or so, approximately. Okay, so on these 3 questions that he got wrong, he spent a lot of time. And what he felt was that he was going away from the strategies that he was following on a regular basis. And this is all from his interview when we talked about it and the entire experience. He said that I was feeling that I'm going out of line. I'm feeling anxious. I'm not using my usual methods. He took a break. He took a break of 20, 30 seconds. He thought about it. He told himself that, okay, whatever done is done. I'm going to stick to my methodologies and I'm going to work on them because that's what has been helping me out till date. And he was able to improve his verbal score from a 34 to a verbal 40. In this attempt, he got a verbal 40, and that too all together in just 24 days, along with a full-time job and reducing his study time to half. So it's very important for you to maintain your exam day anxiety. So if you want to check out his interview, you can actually use this link to go through it in depth later on. I just covered a few parts out of his entire case study. So feel free to go through it at your end. And if you need any help on like your ESR analysis, any improvement areas, feel free to get in touch with me on a call. I have shared the link a little while earlier. I'm gonna show it to you again in this link, so you can actually use this link to schedule a one-on-one discussion with me later on. So let's go get moving and let's now talk about the timing strategy. So Vansh, I'm going to talk about the skipping part now. So don't worry about it. So what is the right test taking strategy for verbal? Again, this is the strategy that will work if you are targeting till verbal 2042. If you're targeting more than that, then there is a little bit of change which is needed. But I'm covering till verbal 42 because that's what most people target. Like that's what most people target. So let's talk about this. Focus on the first 27 questions. They matter the most. Nothing else matters more than the first 27 questions. So give a lot of attention and focus to the first 27 questions. Give questions their due time as required. I'm not saying give extra time to 27 questions. First 27, give it due time as required. That's what is generally required, and this is something which you should fix in the practice phase. As I said earlier also, you cannot fix your timing on the test day. You can only fix your timing in the practice phase. So give the questions their due time. Use the methods that you use. regularly to solve those questions. Don't move away from the method. Don't cut corners in the first 27 questions. And if you have to be selective, then you can be selective in the last quarter. Just solve 50% of the questions. I'm not saying ignore the last quarter. Last quarter is important, but do selectively questions if you are short on time. Okay, if needed, go selective there. Don't try to attempt everything. That's another rookie mistake which a lot of people do. They try to do everything in the last quarter. Doesn't make sense. If you have 10 minutes, 10 questions, don't try to give 1 minute to every question and get it right. You won't get it right. If you are using a certain method, always use that same method to solve questions. Okay, and some important points: don't make consecutive mistakes. If you are doing questions selectively, try not to skip consecutive questions, because that is something which is penalized heavily. Never leave questions unattempted, and try the strategy on a few mocks beforehand. Okay, so timing strategy for verbal, if you ask me, in the 4 quarters, how you should pace yourself is very simple. This is the ideal timing strategy which I recommend for people targeting up to a 42. If your target is more than 42, then probably in the last quarter also you need to do well. So do well as in you might need to have accuracy of about 70 odd percent there. So the timing strategy is about 1 minute 40 seconds should be spent on the first quarter on an average. About 2 minutes should be spent on the second quarter on an average. About 2 minutes 20 seconds should be spent on the third quarter on an average, and about 4 minutes should be 1 minute 20 seconds should be spent on the fourth quarter on an average. Okay, so what do I mean by quarters? Good question. So quarter is basically though there are 36 questions in verbal, so think of first 9 questions as there in the first quarter, and the next 9 is in the next quarter. So that's how a quarter works out. So don't really time yourself linearly. This is the time that you should keep in mind, and this is the time which I'm suggesting because the average difficulty level in each of these quarters is as below. So in the first quarter, you're most likely going to get easy to medium questions only. Okay, easy to medium or around medium level. So that is the time that you should be spending. Understand this part, guys. You should not sit with a clock and like measure yourself that, okay, in the first quarter 1 minute 40 seconds multiplied by 9, so this is the amount of time that I should be spending. If you spend more time than that, then you end up skipping some questions. That's not what I mean to say. Okay, don't do it like this, that okay, for the 9 questions I'm keeping 16 minutes and I need to do 9 questions in 16 minutes. So if you're running short on time, or you are at the 8th question by the end of 16 minutes, you just skip the 9th one. Don't do that, guys. This is just to give an approximate idea that this is the amount of time that you should be taking. Reason being, these are easy to medium questions. So these questions require only this much time. So if you have worked on your application skills properly, and this is a very important precursor and disclaimer I'm giving because many people misunderstand the discussions that I have. If you have worked on your methods, if you have worked on the skills properly, this is the time that you will be taking. So in the practice phase, time yourself in a way that you are able to get an easy to medium question right in 1 minute 40 seconds. And you will be able to do that. Trust me, because that's why the easy medium questions are there. Right? That's the difficulty level deserves only that much time. In only one case, you can spend more time than this. And that case is when, not one, 2 cases actually, when you move away from your usual methods. If you're doing that, then it's a crime. Don't move away from your usual methods on the test day because you're not equipped to do it. Think of it like this, that Sachin Tendulkar is a right-handed batsman. If suddenly in a World Cup final he starts playing left-handed, he will not be able to perform as well because he's not used to doing that. So use your usual strategies. Okay, don't move away from your strategies. The second case, and this is something which is which answers probably your question once. The second case is when you actually end up consuming a lot of time for one particular question. That happens with many people. People take a 4 minutes, 5 minutes on one particular question, they get stuck and most likely get it wrong. So what I tell to them is, when you're skipping, if you have to skip a question or you have to guess a question, how do you guess it? So take a call after you've spent a minute and a half or 2 minutes on the question and be very honest to yourself that are you getting ahead? Are you moving forward? Are you understanding how to do it? If you think that given another 30 seconds on that question, you're confident that you will get it right, then only spend those 30 seconds or 40 seconds. And you can take this call after 2 minutes or 2.5 minutes or 1.5 minutes, depending on your skill level. In my case, I'm very confident about my skills. So after 2 minutes, at the end of 2 minutes, I take this call. If I spend 2 minutes on a question, whether I can get it right if I spend another 30 seconds or 1 minute at max. If I feel I can get it right, I should get it right. Because the questions in the first 3 quarters will matter more than the questions towards the end. So skip only if you're not sure. So in case of geometry, for example, I know I am not great at triangles. Triangles is a pain point that I have, even circles to an extent. So in my case, in the second quarter, I got a triangles question which was hard. I spent 1.5 minutes on it. I was not able to see any head, get any head or toe out of it. I was not able to understand what is happening. I just guessed it and moved forward because I knew whatever time I'm going to spend on this, I might waste it. So you need to be self-aware. You need to skip and guess accordingly, Vansh. Okay, I hope that answers your question. Okay, Vyom is saying, sir, but say I get my first 10 questions correct, won't the 11th question be the hard one? Yeah, that's a good thing, na, Vyom. That's why you're taking that adaptive test. You want the hard questions to appear soon. If you only get the easy questions, even if you get a high accuracy, your score is going to be low. Remember the ESR that I showed earlier? 5 mistakes, verbal 34. 9 mistakes, verbal 21. What's the point of having a high accuracy if you're not able to get a high score? So you need to get the hard questions. The sooner they come, the better for you. Trust me. Okay, so this is the timing. This is how you should time yourself. So baseline time I'm also telling you, and this is for your prep phase. Remember, all this is supposed to be done in your prep phase, and then only it will happen on the test day. On the test day, it should be natural. It should not be forced. So in the prep phase, for SC, you should be spending about 1.5 minutes. For CR, you should be spending about 2 minutes. And for RC, you should be spending about 1 minute 50 seconds. Okay, that's an average time. Again, this will vary for easy, medium, or hard questions. You need to make that adjustment as well. And remember, everyone has strong and weak areas. In my case, SC was my strongest area. So if something is in your strong area, you will take less time on it. So in general, I take about 1 minute 10 seconds to 1 minute 15 seconds on solving an SC question. My percentile in SC was 94. So for your stronger section, you need to adjust this time by 20 seconds. And again, first you need to get strong in one area, then only you can work on the timing part. And in your weaker areas, you need to increase your time by 20 seconds. So if you remember Akshat's example, he was not that great in CR in the first attempt. Okay, in the second attempt, he improved his CR skills significantly. I think he was able to get to his 91 percentile. I'll have to check again, but I guess 91 percentile is what he managed in the second attempt. But his CR timing was still about 2 minutes 30 seconds on an average in the second attempt still. So he was taking more time, but he was getting it right because that's usual. Like he was able to compensate it from SC and RC to an SC primarily to an extent. So you need to adjust your time up and down based on your skill, comfort areas also. And while practicing, you need to devote the right amount of time for each difficulty level. So if you are doing this in the practice phase, it will automatically happen on the test day as well. Okay. Any questions till this point in the verbal testing strategy, guys? Any other questions on the verbal testing strategy till this point? If you have any other questions, feel free to let me know. I'll be more than happy to take it up. And if you want to discuss your strategy in person also later on with me, I'm gonna just share the link again for scheduling a call. You can schedule a consultation call with me using this link over here. I just shared it. So if you have any questions that you would like to ask me right now, you can ask me. If you want to ask me later on, like on one-on-one basis, you can do this using this call link. Okay, I'll just wait for, I guess, 20-30 seconds to see any questions that might pop up. And if nothing pops up, I'll just move forward to the quant strategy then. And I hope you guys are finding this webinar helpful because I've made sure that I kind of bring up a lot of different case studies, cover all different aspects which are required to improve your understanding of the testing strategy on GMAT. And if you're really finding this webinar helpful, please feel free to go ahead and give it a thumbs up, give it a like, so that more and more people are able to view this webinar and they are also benefited from the same. Okay, I guess 30 seconds are over. I don't see any questions. So I hope every one of you is clear with the entire idea. But if any questions are there, feel free to let me know. As I said, I'm going to be an interactive session. I want to ensure that I kind of answer all your queries and you guys have a clear understanding of how to proceed forward. Okay, great. Then let's move forward to the test-taking strategy, timing strategy for quant. Again, a very similar case. I have some case studies in front of you. Two examples, two different students. You have the examples in front of you. Do you see the scores 48 versus 50? You tell me the difference between them. I'm not telling you right now. You tell me the difference between these two students. Okay. and I would wait for about 15-20 seconds. Not sorry, 15-20 seconds will be too less. So I'll wait for about a minute or so for you to respond in the chat. What do you see as the difference between these two students? And let me see some comments from you. I'm going to mute myself for some time. I would like to see your comments in the chat here. I have some responses. Hi, Kanchan. Okay, Ashutosh is initial, right? Good. Yes. So that's the main difference that you can see on your screens, right? So the the student on the right side, if you see, has gotten the initial questions correct. Like the first question, the first quarter, there is 100% accuracy that the student has achieved, vis-a-vis the 86% accuracy in the first quarter. Both of them have a good quant score, but that's the only difference that you can see, and that's the kind of thing that can actually be impacted if you get anything wrong in the first quarter. So that error in the quarter one has costed her. That's true. So that's something we need to work on. That's the importance of the first 10 questions. So in the quant part, I would recommend you to get as high accuracy as possible in the first 10 questions. It actually makes a lot of difference. Okay. Uh, Kanchan is asking what is the time difference between consecutive online GMAT exams. Kanchan, I'm not really 100% sure about the online ones. For the offline ones, 16 days gap needs to be taken, but I'm not sure about the online ones. You might need to check on mba.com to get more information on that, because earlier they did not allow allowed consecutive GMAT, online GMAT. They recently changed that policy. I have not read the recent policies of theirs. Okay, so let's talk about the last 15 questions. So I'm going to give you three more, total three ESRs. Again, this one is the same as you saw on the right side earlier. These are two new ESRs you have on your screen. And I want you to look at these two and understand what's happening here, okay? I wanted you to look at these two and understand what's happening here. So think of it like this, that if you see one thing which is common between all the people, that common element is high accuracy in the first quarter, and again a high accuracy in the second quarter also. So first and second quarter, both of them have, like, all these people have very high accuracies. Okay, so that is something which you can see is common. Now if you look at the accuracies which is like in the second, third, and the last quarter, if you combine that, for the guy who scored a Q50, his accuracy was around 66%. The guy who scored a Q48, his accuracy was around what 50%. The guy who scored a Q47, his accuracy in the last 15 questions was around 35%. Okay, so if you look at the common element here, all these people have a very high accuracy in the first and second quarter. In fact, I can be almost 100% sure that if the guys who got a 48 and 47 also, if they had made one less mistake in the second quarter, the score might have been 1 point more. So what we can say from here is the last 15 questions matter. I'm not saying they don't matter. If you don't have a high accuracy, you may not reach that 47, 48 mark either. They matter, but what is more important is the first 15, and then you can actually do like more mistake. You can manage a decent score with more mistakes in the last quarters, but that's not ideal. But I'm just saying that this is how it generally works. Okay, concern around GMAT online versus test center, I'm going to talk about that as well in a while. Don't worry about that. So what should be a testing strategy for quant? So in quant, you need to first get the first 15 questions right. That's something which is very, very important in quant. Get the first 15 questions right, and then try to maintain a decent accuracy in the third quarter also. So if you see all the three people, another common element was in the third quarter, they had at least decent accuracy, not really bad. Don't be at 25% or 10%. Try to keep it above 50, 60, 70 if possible. And if it is more, then it's great. So try to maintain a decent accuracy in the third quarter. And if you're feeling short on time, solve questions selectively in the last quarter. But let me tell you guys, if you're targeting a quant 50 kind of a number, then you cannot be lenient even with the last quarter. You have to get a good accuracy, upwards of 50% in the last quarter also. But if you're feeling short on time, do questions selectively. Whatever you do, get them right. Don't try to rush and do everything. And in order to build this capability to get the first 15 questions right, what you need to do is get easy and medium questions correct from all areas, including your weak ones. I've seen a very common tendency between among people, that they kind of end up not doing PNC, probability, inequalities. These are some, or coordinate geometry. These are some areas which a lot of people do not really work on at all. And that's a very rookie mistake. That's a very bad mistake, like poor mistake that maybe these people do. In the first 15 questions, most of the questions are going to be from easy and medium. I'm not saying there won't be hard questions, but there will be many easy and medium questions in the first 15. Let's say you get a question in the first 15 from a weak area. You have not done permutation combination at all. You have not done probability at all. And you get a question from that area. What will happen? You'll get it wrong. And the reason for that is you're not covered it at all. So in the prep time, make sure you're covering at least the easy and medium questions from all the topics, even your weak ones. Don't ignore them. That's the idea. All right. And don't make like other things obviously stand the same. So how should your timing be on quant? So this is how you should time yourself for quant in the individual quarters. Because again, if you're targeting somewhere around that Q50 mark, in the first quarter, you are going to mostly have medium to medium hard questions. Some easy questions may be there. So overall, around 1 minute 30 seconds is what you should time yourself at. For medium hard to hard questions, around 2 minutes 10 seconds. For hard to very hard, around 2 minutes 40 seconds. And this is the time that I also take for hard and very hard questions. So be open to giving that time for in the third quarter. It is most likely going to be the case. And in the last quarter, whatever time is left, you manage. So while practicing, what you need to do is devote the right amount of time for each difficulty level, something that should happen naturally. This is a natural process. If a question is more difficult, then it should take more time. Don't try to do a hard question in 2 minutes, because on an average, you won't be able to do it. From the areas which you're comfortable with, you might be able to. But overall, the average time for hard questions is slightly going to be more than 2 minutes. That's what you should be doing naturally also in your practice phase. And identify your comfort areas and be selective right from quarter 3 if required. And if you have spent more time on questions on uncomfortable areas, you are probably wasting your energy there. So remember, this is something which I even talked about. For example, I knew that triangles is one area where I'm not so comfortable with. But I developed a habit that at least the easy and medium questions I can manage from triangles. So whenever I saw a hard question, I used to give some bit of time to it. And after that time, if I'm still not able to get a hold of it or hang off that question, I will rather skip it and move forward. So make sure you're timing yourself in that way. Okay. And don't take simple questions too lightly, especially the DS ones. This is a common mistake which a lot of people do. They take DS questions lightly towards the beginning. Make sure that you're doing this proper analysis, developing the proper understanding, so that you're not missing cases of falling for traps. Okay. So that's basically about it. Now, very important point. I've most likely covered it, but another case in point. Does devoting extra time in beginning solve all the problems? Focus on this part. Does it solve all the problems? Okay, it does not. Trust me, guys, it does not. Okay, 2 ESRs again in front of you. Look at this again. Verbal ESRs I'm showing. 100% accuracy in the first quarter. I had a 75% accuracy in the first quarter. How the student achieved this 100% accuracy was the student actually spent 3 minutes on the first quarter itself. Per question, 3 minutes that student spent on the first quarter. Now, obviously, this helped. She got a higher difficulty level questions. If you see the average difficulty level, mine is here, average difficulty level, and hers is here. Okay, so she got a more difficult set of questions in the second quarter. But since she spent a lot of time in the first quarter, she had to rush through, and the accuracy started dwindling after it. And that's why you see the difference in the scores. Okay, 37 versus a 41. Again, 37 is not a bad score. I'm not saying it's a bad score. But all I'm saying is, just by thinking that, okay, you spend more time on the questions and the initial questions, and you will get a high score, that's the wrong thought process. And this case in point, I've just kept to bring about this point that you should not be looking for shortcuts. You need to work in your prep phase to fix the main issues that are there. Work on your concept issues, work on your application issues, and then only you can see your improvement in scores. No strategy can help you unless you work on this. Okay. So with that, I'm going to come to the right section order and about online versus offline GMAT as well, which is a common question which a lot of you were asking. Now, in GMAT at home, which is the online GMAT, you only have one section order, which is quant followed by verbal followed by IR, and there is only one 5 minute break between verbal and IR. Okay, there is no break in between quant and verbal, which is a very big negative of the online GMAT, in my opinion. The second big negative is there's a fixed section order. You cannot start with verbal. Okay, the test center GMAT, on the other hand, has more flexibility. Provides you three different options as to start with. So basically, you can either start with quant, then go to verbal, and then do IR and AWA, or you can start with verbal, then do quant, and then do IR and AWA in the end, or you can start with IR and AWA first, and then do quant, then do verbal. So, in my opinion, honestly speaking, the third one does not make sense for anyone unless you are someone who is completely zoned out in the initial period for 30, 40 minutes or 1 hour. I don't recommend the third strategy at all, because when you're fresh, when you're new to the test, you have more energy. Utilize it on the areas which matter. Quant and verbal is what matters. IRA and AWA is, I'm not saying it does not matter, but they're not counted out of a score of 8 out of 800. And many schools just look at a minimum score in these areas. And many schools don't even mind that, like what is the score in IRA and AWA. So focus should be on quant and verbal. So let's understand which of the two section orders makes more sense. Okay, and this is what will also help us identify whether online GMAT makes more sense or test center GMAT makes more sense. Okay, so let's see. So there are two schools of thought that exist here. So where AWA is not compulsory. AWA is compulsory if you're taking the test center format. AWA is not there in the online format. So one school of thought is you start strong. So you start with a stronger area to gain confidence and then move on to your weaker area. The second school of thought is you utilize your focus. You're most active initially when you're just starting the test, and you focus on the weaker area in that time because you are more focused, so you are able to get a better outcome out of it. So you start with your weaker area because you will be able to manage it better with more focus, and then you work on the stronger area later on. Even if you're fatigued a little, you can still do better in your stronger area because it's a strong area. So that's the second school of thought. Personally, I used to follow the first school of thought for 90% of my prep, to be honest. Okay, I used to do this for 90% of my prep because I felt that, okay, it is always better to start on a strong foot. It gives you that motivation and all of that. If you require motivation in the beginning, that's something you should do. And or if you take some time to warm up, you can probably do the first approach. But in the later half of my prep, not the later half actually, in the last 10% of my prep, I actually moved to the second school of thought. I was not even considering the second school of thought earlier. And when I moved to it, I actually found it to be better. And that's a personal choice, to be very honest. And what you need to do is you need to try one or two mocks with each of these methods and then see which one works for you the best and stick to it on the day of the test. Now I stick to the second school of thought always. Why it works better is because when you're new to the test, when you're just starting the test, you have more focus, more energy. So you better utilize that where you need it the most. You need it the most on the weak area. So utilize it there. Okay. And if you're really strong in the strong area, for example, in quant, I knew that I'm really strong. Even if on the worst day, I will end up scoring a Q50. That was the level of confidence that I had. Just give me 1 second, guys. So I was very confident about my quant skills. I knew that on the worst day also I can end up with a Q50. So I knew that even if I'm a little fatigued in the second half, I will do decently well still. So that was the thought process that I had. So I went with verbal followed by quant followed by IR and AWA. That's the order that I followed. And I recommend this to people who are weak in verbal. Okay. So you can try this again. Don't just blindly follow this. Try this on a few mock tests and try the other one also. See which one is more comfortable for you. And if you work better with this format, then it is better to go and take the test from the test center. Okay. Obviously, there are multiple factors that you have to look at also. One is obviously whether it is safe in your city to go to the test center and all. Nowadays, we have more or less moved ahead in our life and tried to live alongside this entire pandemic. The second thing is obviously you have to wear a mask. So all those factors have to be taken into account. But I personally feel the test center format is better. You have more flexibility there. You have breaks also in the online format. You don't have break between verbal, quant and verbal, which is something which I can do with, but again, it puts you at a disadvantage compared to other people who are taking from the test center. They have a 8 minute break. And a lot of people tell me that, okay, I have this anxiety issues. It will be better if I take it from home. I'll be feeling more comfortable. I personally don't agree with that in most of the cases, because if you're feeling anxious, it has more to do with the GMAT test and not to with the environment as much, to be honest. So that's how I think about it. So let me now summarize the key takeaways from today's session. We are coming to the end of the session today. So let me summarize the key takeaways. So devoting extra time is not equal to high accuracy. Very important, guys. Make sure that you are not feeling or not thinking that, okay, my job is done. I've learned a lot from the webinar today. I'm just going to devote more time to the first few quarters and I'm going to get a high score. That's not how it works on GMAT. So make sure you are focusing your energy in the right areas. High time does not mean high accuracy. That's the wrong inference if you're doing that. You need to know how to get the questions right correct consistently. That is something which is important. Reduce your time taken per question in your practice phase. Do that by identifying exact pain areas and work on them. Identify whether it is concept specific or application specific and work on it the way I told you earlier. Don't change your strategies on the test day. Very important. Even if you are found under time press, time constraints, skip questions selectively, but make sure you do the questions the way you are used to doing it. Don't use something else, because this is the worst choice that you can make. I see many students telling me that, okay, Piyush, I learned a lot of new strategies from the course, but then on the test day I applied something else and my result was very bad. I said, why did you do that? Then what is the what is the like reason behind putting in that much time and effort on learning that method? Make sure you're following the same strategies. And if you have to selectively do questions, do it as late as possible in the test. Okay. And if you're feeling anxious during the test, take strategic timeout as I talked about, and try to get a streak of consecutive questions correct. That's what is that the higher, the bigger the streak, like the more questions you get consecutively correct, the higher your score is gonna be. That's something which is very crucial. And spend more time on reading the questions and don't cut corners there. And in the last, no testing strategy works if you're not prepared for the test. Okay, that is something which is very, very critical. So that's all about the webinar today. I'm opening it up formally to the Q&A part of the webinar. I'm gonna be here in the Q&A for about 10-15 minutes. So if you have any questions around your prep, around the exam, anything, let me know. You guys can also reach out to me on piyush@gmatviz.com. And if you're looking for a free personalized study plan or a free trial of our course, you can actually register on our website for a free trial. I'm just going to give you that link. I'm available on piyush@gmatviz.com, and the WhatsApp number that you see is the WhatsApp number I personally use. So you can actually ping me on this WhatsApp number as well if you have any queries around it. Feel free to let me know if you have any queries as of now. And if you really like this webinar, let me know what is that you liked about the webinar. What are the things that you learned? Feel free to summarize your lessons here. And if you like the webinar, do give it a thumbs up so that more and more people are able to benefit from it. Okay, so please let me know. Edwin, happy to know that the webinar helped. Do give it a thumbs up and feel free to share it among your friends who want to look at the test taking strategies and understand that better. Okay. So Satish is asking how important is AWA in selection process. So again, Satish, AWA, you need a minimum score of 4.5. You go through the Chinese word template, and that should mostly help you get a good understanding of it. The first ever essay I wrote on my was on my GMAT test day actually. And I got a 5.5 out of it by just following the template, and I was good at CR. So you need to be good at CR to do well on AWA. Okay, that's how it is. Okay, so I'll wait for a few more questions to come. Ashutosh, thank you so much. I am glad to know that the webinar helped. And one more announcement in the meantime. We're actually gonna run a Christmas sale, like starting on. Actually, we are starting the sale on 24th. But since those of you are attending this webinar, you're gonna get quick access to this, like let's say a special access, privileged access to this deal earlier itself. So in this deal, we are actually giving a 60% off on our courses on the online plan. And you can get access to this prep plan for a fee of $199 only. So if those of you who are interested in taking this deal, I'm gonna send this link shortly over here, so you guys can utilize this link. Okay. This is deal that we are offering, and the entire like the package that we offer is a personalized package. We have a course which is a completely adaptive course. It's very different from any course which is out there, and you have a weekly study plan given to you, weekly task list given to you. Your job is as simple as clicking on start button and getting started. So this is the Christmas deal that we are offering. I've just shown it to you on your page also, so you can just use it to avail the discount early. Okay. Vansh has a question. Vansh says, any tips for the last 10 days before the exam? Yes, Vansh. So if you are looking at like the last 10 days before the test, one thing, don't cram a lot. Identify your weak areas. Like focus on the concept gaps primarily, and then a little bit on application gaps also. Devote about 50% of your time on the weak areas or a little more, and then the rest of the time on practicing. Not more than two mocks in the last 10 days, and no mock in the last 2 days before the test. Try to sleep well. Try to make sure that you are studying in the same time slot when you have the test, so and you're taking tests around that time slot, and on the test day you don't study a lot. That's something which is very, very important. Okay, so that is all about that. Let's see other questions. Vyom says how to improve on IR. So Vyom, IR is kind of an extension to Quant, I would say. So if you're actually let's say doing well on the quant part, you can actually do well on IR. All you need to do is make sure that you're aware of the IR question types. So solve a little bit of questions, understand what is the question really asking. If you're a working professional, you would have most likely seen some data here and there. IR should not be a big challenge if your quant is good and you're understanding the question types. So just give 2-3 days on the practice part of it and you should be good there. Okay. Happy to know, Ahuna, that the session helped. Thank you so much. Feel free to share it with other people who might find it helpful. Okay. Satish is asking, would AWA have an effect in the selection process if you choose online mode? Not really, Satish. Both the online and test center GMAT scores are accepted by the schools. So you don't need to really worry about online GMAT not having the AWA part. Okay. So great, guys. I don't see any other questions. I'll probably wait for a couple of more minutes. And if you guys want to discuss with me later on, one-on-one, you can use this link to schedule a call with me. Vyom is asking how long is the free trial. So GMAT Viz free trial, Vyom, is actually limited by content, not by timing. So we give you access to 10% of our course in the free trial, and you can access it like accordingly. There's not really a time limit, like we give a 90-day kind of a thing, but that's more like to just take care of the dormant accounts, nothing else. So otherwise 10% content is there, and the structure of the paid course is going to be slightly different. If you want to check out the paid course, how the structure is, once you log into the free trial, you go to the study plan page. On top of the study plan page, you will find a tab called course tab. There are two tabs, personalized plan and course. If you click on the course tab, you'll be able to see the paid course structure. You won't be able to access it, but you can see the paid course structure. Okay. One says, okay, thank you, Vansh. I'm happy that the webinar was helpful. Feel free to share it with your friends and others who can find it helpful. Thank you, Satish. Thank you, Vyom. So I don't see any other questions. So it was great interacting with all of you guys. Then I hope the webinar was helpful. Ensure that you go through this. If you have missed certain parts, go through this recording. It should be available on YouTube really soon. And make sure that you apply these strategies. And remember, none of the strategies work unless you put it to practice. So make sure you're putting it into practice and apply those strategies. All the best for your GMAT, and looking forward to connect with some of you. And you can always reach out to me on these details. Thank you so much.